Your job isn't real. You just sit at a computer, my dad said while bragging about my brother's construction gig at every dinner. That same fake job was paying their electricity, water, and internet every month. They found out when all three got cut on the same day. My mother called me on a Tuesday afternoon, panicking because the house had gone completely dark. No electricity, no water, no internet. And she had no idea why. Let me back up. Sup Reddit. I'm Travis, 31, software engineer at a company that builds back-end infrastructure for logistics platforms. If that sentence made your eyes glaze over, congratulations, you'd fit right in at my family's dinner table. Because according to my father Leonard, what I do for a living isn't real work. His words, repeated at every meal, every holiday, every chance he got. Usually with a Budweiser in his hand, and my brother Colton sitting across from him looking like he just won a Nobel Prize for carrying drywall up a flight of stairs. Colton is 28. He worked construction. I say worked, and I'll get to why that's past tense, but for now just know that to my parents, Colton was the golden child. The man's man. The one who came home dirty, smelling like concrete dust and diesel and sweat, and that was somehow proof of value. Proof of character. Proof that you were contributing something real to the world. Meanwhile, I came home, sat down at a desk in my room, opened a laptop, and apparently ceased to exist as a contributing member of society. My dad used to say, when Colton goes to work, he builds things people can touch. When Travis goes to work, he stares at a screen and pretends it matters. He said it like it was a harmless joke, but you could hear the conviction underneath every syllable. He believed it in his bones. My mom, Lorraine, never corrected it. Not once. Not even a gentle, "That's not fair, Leonard." She'd just pass the mashed potatoes and redirect the conversation to something safer. 30 years of marriage to a man like Leonard had taught her that disagreement wasn't worth the volume it cost. Silence was her default setting. I inherited that from her. Let me give you the numbers now. Because numbers don't lie, even when entire families do. 3 years ago, I set up auto payments for 3 household bills. Electricity, water, internet. At the time, my parents were behind on all 3. Disconnection notices were piling up on the kitchen counter like junk mail nobody wanted to open. I didn't make a speech about it. Didn't hold a family meeting. Didn't ask for a thank you card. I just opened my banking app one Sunday night, entered the account numbers my dad gave me, set up the recurring payments, and went to bed. The monthly total was $1,400. Electricity averaged about $287, spiking to $340 in summer because Leonard refused to get the AC unit serviced because that was throwing money at a machine. Water was $94, steady year-round. Internet was $180, which seemed steep for a residential plan, but I didn't question it at the time. I should have. That number will become very important later. Over 3 years, those payments added up to $50,400. $50,400. To keep that house running. Colton contributed exactly zero. Not a dollar. Not a cent. Not once. Not even on a month where I mentioned bills were due. His paychecks, when he was actually earning them, went to truck payments on a Ford F-150 he'd financed at 14% interest because his credit was garbage. They went to Nike Jordans he wore once and kept in boxes in his closet like they were investments. They went to weekend trips to the coast with his buddies where he'd pick up bar tabs and text photos of bottle service to a group chat full of guys who thought he was doing great. Nobody in my family had a problem with this arrangement because nobody in my family ever stopped to consider that the arrangement existed. Or more specifically, that I existed inside it. My dad's favorite performance was dinner. Every single dinner was a tribute to Colton's work ethic. Leonard would sit at the head of the table and hold court like a man who'd earned the right to narrate everyone else's value. Colton poured a foundation today. Colton's crew finished ahead of schedule. Colton's foreman told me personally he's the hardest worker on the site. The man could have been reading a citation for a Medal of Honor, and it would have sounded less reverent. Then he'd glance over at me. The look. You know it. Not hostile exactly. Something worse. Dismissive. Like I was furniture that occasionally ate the food he didn't pay for. Travis was on his computer again today, he'd say. Then the chuckle. Not a laugh. A chuckle. The kind that lets everyone know you're not being taken seriously. Sometimes Colton joined in. Sometimes my mom smiled tightly and changed the subject. The scene never varied. It played like a recording nobody had the decency to stop. Let me be specific about what my fake job actually involved, because precision matters, and my father never bothered with any. I was a mid-level software engineer earning $97,000 annually. I designed routing algorithms that moved shipping containers across ports on 3 continents. My code handled real-time transaction loads that would crash most commercial platforms within minutes. I maintained a security clearance for a Department of Defense logistics contract. I worked 60-hour weeks during deployment cycles and was on emergency call 2 weekends a month. I once stayed up 37 hours straight to fix a bug that was rerouting $2.3 million worth of pharmaceutical shipments to the wrong hemisphere. But I sat at a computer. So according to Leonard, I might as well have been playing solitaire for a living. Here's where it starts to get interesting. My uncle Franklin cornered me at a cousin's graduation party. Franklin is Leonard's younger brother, quieter, more observant, the kind of guy who sits in the back of every room and sees everything nobody else notices. He pulled me aside near the drink table and said, "I need to tell you something, because nobody else in this family has the spine to do it." He told me Leonard had been telling the entire extended family I was unemployed. Not struggling, not freelancing, not between contracts. Unemployed. The phrase Franklin quoted was still figuring things out. For years, aunts, uncles, second cousins, family friends, people I made small talk with at Thanksgiving were apparently looking at me with pity I couldn't understand, because my own father had fabricated an alternate version of my life and distributed it to everyone who shared our last name. Some relatives had apparently discussed pooling money to help me get back on my feet. Meanwhile, Colton was being introduced at every gathering as the one with a real career. Franklin said he only started questioning the story when he saw me arrive at a barbecue in a car that no unemployed person could afford. He looked at the car, looked at me, did the math, and the math didn't support Leonard's narrative. That conversation rewired something in my brain. But I kept paying the bills, kept my mouth shut. Old habits die slow when they've been keeping the peace your entire life. Then Lorraine asked me to add Colton's phone bill to my auto payments. She said it like she was asking me to grab eggs from the store. Breezy. Decided. Since you're already paying everything else, Travis, just add Colton's phone to whatever you've got set up. He works with his hands all day. He's exhausted when he comes home. You just sit at a desk. I was standing in the kitchen holding a glass of water. I watched the condensation slide down the side of the glass and heard every word my mother said, and felt something shift inside my chest. Not anger exactly. Recognition. She wasn't being intentionally cruel. That was the part that cut deepest. She genuinely, fundamentally believed that what I did required no effort. That my contribution was automatic. That the $1,400 leaving my account every month cost me nothing emotionally, physically, mentally, because it wasn't real, in the way that swinging a hammer was real. To her, my payments were gravity. Always present, never examined, and only noticed when they stop. I said no. First time in 3 years I'd refused anything. Lorraine looked at me like I'd thrown a plate at the wall. 2 weeks later came the dinner with Leonard's construction crew. He invited 4 guys from his job site for a Friday cookout. Steaks, Coors Light in a cooler, classic rock on a Bluetooth speaker connected to the internet I paid for. Leonard walked Colton around the backyard like a show horse at auction. Introduced him to every man by name, by trade, by years of experience. This is my boy Colton, construction just like his old man, chip off the block, hardest worker you'll ever meet. Handshakes, back slaps, the full blue-collar fraternity ritual. Then he got to me. I was standing at the grill flipping burgers because naturally I was the one doing the actual cooking. Leonard waved vaguely in my direction and told one of his guys, "That's Travis. He's the tech guy." Air quotes. With his actual fingers. Like the phrase needed quotation marks because the concept was fictional. The guy, thick neck, sunburned, genuinely friendly, asked me what I actually did. Leonard stepped in before I could open my mouth. Honestly, we're still not sure. 4 men laughed. My father laughed the longest and the loudest. Sabrina was there, my girlfriend of 2 years. She didn't say a word during the entire cookout. Smiled politely, ate a burger, helped clean up, but in the car on the way home, she was quiet for a long time. The street lights were passing over her face in these rhythmic pulses, and I could see her jaw was tight. Then she said, quiet and steady, "They don't forget what you do, Travis. They just don't care." She wasn't angry. She was grieving on my behalf. That was worse than anything Leonard ever said to me. After that night, I stopped being passive. I started looking, really looking. And what I found took the floor out from under everything I thought I understood about my family. Discovery number 1. Colton hadn't worked construction in 7 months. Fired. For showing up drunk. Not once or twice. Repeatedly. Over several weeks. His foreman finally let him go after an incident where he nearly dropped a steel I-beam on a coworker's head. Missed the guy by about 18 inches. That firing happened 7 months before the backyard cookout where Leonard was bragging about Colton's legendary work ethic to 4 grown men while I silently flipped burgers 10 feet away. For those 7 months, every single morning, Colton left the house at 6:45 a.m. in steel-toe boots, work jeans, and a high-vis vest. He drove to a Walmart parking lot 3 miles from the house and parked in the back corner. He sat there until 4 p.m., scrolling his phone, napping with the seat reclined, eating gas station breakfast sandwiches for lunch. Then he'd drive home, take a shower, come downstairs with wet hair and tired eyes, and accept Leonard's nightly tribute like a king accepting taxes. My parents never checked, never called his employer, never noticed his direct deposits had stopped, never wondered why his boots were still clean. The entire Golden Child narrative was built on a performance, and Leonard and Lorraine were too invested in the story to look behind the curtain. They didn't want to know. Knowing would mean the only son they respected wasn't who they thought he was. And that story was the only thing keeping the family's self-image from collapsing. Discovery number 2, the basement tenant. My dad had a renter. A full-time, paying tenant living in the finished basement with a separate entrance around the side of the house I never used. The guy had been there for over 2 years, paying Leonard $800 a month in cash. No lease. No paper trail. No taxes reported. That's $19,200 over the period. Leonard collected that money every first of the month in an envelope while telling me the family could barely survive without my bill payments. Lorraine knew. She'd made the guy a pie when he moved in. Colton knew. He'd helped move a couch down there. The tenant knew me by name. He told a mutual acquaintance later that he could hear Leonard making jokes about me through the kitchen floor on a regular basis. Everyone in that house was aware of the tenant's existence and his monthly payments except the person funding the rest of the household. I was the only one standing outside the loop, writing checks into a system that was laughing at me from the inside. Discovery number 3, the secret bank account. Lorraine left her purse open on the kitchen table one Saturday afternoon. A folded bank statement from a credit union I'd never heard of was poking out from a side pocket. I shouldn't have looked, but I did. Savings account at a small credit union 40 minutes from our house. Balance, $31,000. She'd been skimming from the grocery budget I funded. Every month, I transferred her $600 for groceries and household supplies. She spent $400, pocketed $200, deposited it into this account on the same day each month. She'd been doing it for years. The math was clean. $200 a month for roughly 13 years, with minimal interest, tracks exactly to $31,000. She was building an escape fund. She was planning to leave Leonard. That is why she never defended me at dinner. Not because she agreed with him. Not because she didn't see the damage. But because she could not risk disrupting the financial ecosystem that allowed her to siphon $200 a month into her exit plan. If she stood up for me and Leonard cut off access to the money, her fund would stop growing. She needed me dismissed, diminished, and compliant, so the machine kept running. My mother traded my dignity for her freedom. I sat in my car in the driveway after finding that statement and stared at the steering wheel for 45 minutes. I recalibrated every memory I had of Lorraine defending Leonard, redirecting conversations, patting my hand, and saying, "That's just how your father is." Every one of those moments was a strategic choice. Discovery number 4, the recording. An anonymous email arrived on a Thursday night. Burner address. No subject line. One attachment. A voice memo. 3 minutes and 47 seconds. I pressed play and heard my mother and Colton rehearsing a script. Not a script for a play. A script for me. They were planning how to convince me to co-sign a car loan for Colton. Line by line. Beat by beat. Lorraine's coaching. Tell him you've been struggling financially and you didn't want to burden anyone, but he's the only person you trust. Use the word trust. Colton's contribution. And if he pushes back or says no, I'll say I totally understand. Then I'll look really disappointed and walk out of the room without arguing. He can't handle feeling like he's disappointing someone. He'll call me back within an hour. My mother responded, "That's perfect. Travis won't say no. He never says no. That's what makes this easy." They were engineering my emotional responses like a project plan. My mother had spent 31 years cataloging my psychological vulnerabilities and was now deploying them as tools for financial manipulation. I listened to the recording 3 times. Then I saved it to 2 cloud drives and a USB stick I locked in my desk drawer. The recording came from Daphne, Colton's girlfriend. She'd been watching the family dynamics play out for nearly a year and reached her threshold the night she heard Lorraine say, "That's what makes this easy." She sent it from a burner email because she didn't want to be identified. She and Colton broke up 3 months later. I don't think the breakup was unrelated. Discovery number 5, the money trail. This required professional help. My friend Reed is a forensic accountant, and I asked him to review my auto payment records because something about the electricity account number had been nagging me. It didn't match the format the utility company used for residential accounts. Reed pulled the routing information. The payments I'd been making for 3 years for electricity weren't going to the electric company at all. They were going to Leonard's personal checking account at a regional bank. My father had given me his own account number, formatted to look like a utility payment portal. He'd been intercepting my electricity payments, paying the actual bill himself on a cheaper plan, and pocketing the difference. $340 every month. For 36 months. That is $12,240 my father stole from me, while simultaneously telling the extended family I was unemployed. Reed sat across from me in his office, staring at the spreadsheet he'd built. He didn't say anything for almost a minute. Then, "Travis, this isn't just disrespect. This is wire fraud." I nodded. I knew. I'd known since the moment the account numbers didn't match. I just needed another human being to say it out loud, so I could stop wondering if I was the one who was crazy. I ran one final test. Stopped the internet payment. Just that one. No announcement. No warning. I wanted to observe the family's response pattern like a controlled experiment. The internet died on a Thursday afternoon. Nobody called me. Instead, Leonard called the ISP directly and spent 45 minutes verbally assaulting a customer service representative, threatening to sue, demanding supervisors of supervisors, claiming his rights as a customer were being violated. The rep, God bless whoever drew the short straw that day, calmly informed him, "Sir, the account belongs to someone named Travis. You are not listed as an authorized user, and I cannot discuss the account with you." Leonard hung up, hard, and then never mentioned the incident to me. Not that night. Not the next day. Not ever. The internet came back within 24 hours because the auto payment cycled through before the hard cutoff date. And Leonard just sat down at the kitchen table, opened his laptop, connected to the Wi-Fi he didn't pay for, and continued existing in a version of reality he'd built entirely from other people's money and his own refusal to look at a single bill. That told me everything I needed to know. He knew whose name was on those accounts. He always knew. He just never intended to acknowledge it because acknowledging it would mean admitting the fake job was the only real thing keeping his household standing. That was the last test. I called Conrad the next morning and accepted the Denver relocation. Senior engineer. $38,000 raise. Stock options vesting over 24 months. Conrad shook my hand and said, "You are the most undervalued person I have ever managed, and I've been doing this for 22 years. I almost broke down in his office. That was the first time a man I respected had looked at me and said, without hedging, that I had value. My own father couldn't do it in 31 years. A man who'd known me for 3 managed it over a handshake. I canceled all 3 auto payments on the same day. Electricity, water, internet. Time to terminate on the same billing cycle. Then I canceled Netflix, Hulu, Amazon Prime, Spotify, and the pest control service I'd been quietly paying to manage the ant and roach problem nobody knew existed. I changed every password, redirected all billing notifications to my email so no physical warning letters would arrive at the house. They would get 0 notice, 0 transition time, 0 chance to prepare. I moved my things out over 4 quiet trips while everyone was at work. Took only what was mine. Left my house key on the kitchen counter. No note. The day everything went dark was a Wednesday in August. Lorraine called at 2:14 p.m. I was sitting in my new apartment in Denver, eating a sandwich at my desk, looking at 14,000-foot peaks through floor-to-ceiling windows. Her voice was shaking. Travis, the electricity is off. The water isn't running. The internet is dead. Everything just stopped at once. What's happening? I chewed, swallowed, took a sip of water. I don't know, Mom. I moved out last week. You'll have to ask whoever pays those bills. Dead silence. Not the dramatic kind. The kind where someone's mental math is producing answers that don't fit inside any version of their life they're prepared to accept. Colton called the utility company. They said the account had been closed by the account holder. He didn't know what account holder meant in practical terms. He had never interacted with a utility company in 28 years of life. He called me. I let it ring. Leonard came home to a dark house in 92-degree heat. No lights, no AC, no water. He sat in his truck in the driveway for 40 minutes because the house was an oven. Then he called me. Voicemail. Emergency family meeting. By candlelight, because that's where they were now. Colton couldn't contribute a dime because he was financing a $42,000 truck on a salary he hadn't earned in 7 months. Lorraine's part-time gift shop job covered food and nothing else, and she wasn't about to touch her $31,000 escape fund for a problem she considered Leonard's fault. Leonard's construction pay went to his own truck payment and personal expenses, which I now understood included the $340 a month he was skimming from my electricity payments. Nobody had bill money. The math was always me. Every dollar that kept that house functional came from a laptop in a room they never entered doing work they never respected. Colton tried to open an electricity account in his name. Denied. Credit score, 580. Leonard tried. Denied. Outstanding balance from a previous address he'd walked away from 11 years ago. Lorraine had no credit history at all. None. 0 entries. 3 adults in one house, and not a single one of them could independently get the lights turned on. Lorraine called again, crying hard. We had no idea you were paying all of that, Travis. I let the sentence sit for 3 full seconds. Then, you had no idea? You haven't seen a utility bill in your own home for 3 years, and that never struck you as unusual? Not once. Nothing. There was nothing to say. Within a week, the pest control labs caught up. The ants came back first. Then the roaches. Then something in the walls that Lorraine couldn't identify. The house didn't just go dark. It decomposed. Every invisible system I'd maintained announced itself through failure. Every problem I'd quietly solved became a crisis the moment I stopped solving it. Lorraine tried calling me for more times that week. I answered the third one. She was calmer by then, but there was a new edge to her voice. Not anger. Calculation. She said, Travis, I understand you're upset, but you can't just abandon your family like this. We need to sit down and talk about a transition plan. You can't just cut everything off overnight. A transition plan. Like I was a departing employee who owed 2 weeks' notice. Like the $50,400 I'd already paid was a retainer with an exit clause I hadn't honored. I said, Mom, there was no agreement. There was no contract. There was me paying your bills while Dad told people I was unemployed and you skimmed grocery money into a secret savings account. That's not a partnership. That's a con. And the con is over. She hung up on me. First time in my life my mother hung up on me. It felt like the most honest thing she'd ever done. The internet was the one that hit them hardest, which surprised me. Not the electricity, not the water, the internet. Because it turned out Colton had been running his entire fake employment cover through that connection. His phone was on the home Wi-Fi. His truck payment auto-drafted through an app that needed internet. His Netflix, his Hulu, his DoorDash, his dating apps, his group chats with friends who still thought he worked construction. All of it ran through the $180 per month connection I funded. And about that $180. Remember how I said the residential plan seemed expensive? Reed figured out why. Someone had upgraded it to a premium business tier. Static IP address, priority bandwidth, enhanced upload speeds. Colton had done it himself because he'd started flipping items on eBay. He was running a resale operation through my internet account, using my bandwidth, using the static IP address that eBay power sellers need for reliable listings. He was building a business on infrastructure I paid for while my father told people my work wasn't real. When the internet died, Colton's eBay store went offline. 37 active listings disappeared. 3 buyers opened disputes because orders stopped processing. His side hustle collapsed in 72 hours. The real work, Guy's only actual source of income, ran entirely on the fake job, Guy's internet bill. I didn't learn this until later, but when I did, I laughed for about 4 minutes straight. Sabrina thought I was losing my mind. Maybe I was. But it was the funniest thing I'd ever heard. The house started falling apart in other ways too. Lorraine called a plumber about a leaking pipe under the kitchen sink. The plumber came, took one look, and said the water softener system hadn't been maintained in weeks and the filter was clogged. That was another thing I'd been handling. I had a maintenance schedule on my phone with quarterly reminders for the water softener, the air filters, the dryer vent cleaning, the gutter flush. Nobody knew the schedule existed because nobody ever asked what I did around the house. They just assumed things worked. Things always worked when I lived there. Now the systems were failing one by one, each on its own timeline, and each failure was a reminder of something I'd done that nobody had noticed. Without me holding the financial architecture together, the family turned inward and started eating itself. Leonard and Lorraine had their first real fight about money in 3 decades. Leonard blamed Lorraine for not keeping Travis in line. Lorraine detonated. 30 years of compressed silence came out in one kitchen-shaking eruption. You drove him out. I told you every single year to stop belittling him at the table. I told you, and you laughed at me the same way you laughed at him. This is your fault. Leonard blamed Colton for never paying a bill. Colton blamed Leonard for building the lie. Lorraine blamed both of them for destroying the only functional system the household had. The structure folded, not because I attacked it, because I stopped being its foundation. Leonard's construction crew found out. Word moves fast in the trades. The same 4 guys from the cookout now had premium material for every coffee break. Hey Leonard, heard your fake job son was bankrolling your entire existence. Hey Leonard, you know how to set up a utility account, or do you need Travis to explain it to you? The identity he'd built his entire ego around, the blue-collar provider, the man who worked with his hands while his son played on a computer, became the single funniest joke on every job site in the county. He stopped eating lunch with his crew, started sitting in his truck alone during breaks. The image of Leonard sitting alone in his truck in a parking lot, hiding from the truth, was identical to Colton sitting alone in a Walmart parking lot pretending to have a job. The men in my family, it turned out, handled shame the same way. They sat in trucks and waited for it to pass. Franklin made sure the extended family knew. He called Leonard and said, flatly, "You told every person in this family that Travis was unemployed and you should be ashamed. We were pitying that boy at Thanksgiving dinners while he was keeping your house running. You lied to all of us." Franklin didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The facts were loud enough. Colton broke first. He drove 8 hours to Denver without telling our parents. Showed up at my apartment on a Sunday night. I opened the door and he was standing there in a hoodie from high school, looking like he hadn't slept in a week. He didn't ask for money. Didn't have a prepared pitch. He just sat on my couch, stared at the floor, and was quiet for a long time. Then, I didn't know it was that much. "I thought you just helped with the internet." I sat across from him. "The internet was $180 a month, Colton. The total was $1,400. Every month. For 3 years. I watched him do the math in his head. Watched the number register on his face. $50,000, he said, barely above a whisper. I nodded. He put his head in his hands and didn't move for a long time. He told me he'd gotten his first electricity bill, set up through a prepaid program they'd finally qualified for. $287. For 1 month. He said he stared at the number for 20 minutes at the kitchen table. Then he called me. "You were paying this every month?" I said, "Every month. For 3 years. While you sat in a Walmart parking lot pretending you had a job and spent money you weren't earning on shoes you didn't need." He didn't deny it. He sat there on my couch in Denver, and for the first time in our lives, the real numbers were in the room and neither of us could pretend otherwise. 6 months passed. I was settled. Denver apartment with mountain views from every window. Senior engineer title with a team that treated my work like it mattered because it did. Sabrina moved in. We got a dog from a shelter, a mutt with absurdly large ears we named Radar, because he heard everything and judged nothing. He followed me from room to room and slept at the foot of our bed and didn't care whether I wrote code or carried drywall. He just wanted to be near me. I went to therapy twice a week. Some sessions were hard. Some were just recalibrating. But I showed up for them. That was new. Showing up for myself instead of showing up for people who didn't notice I was there. During those 6 months, I got bits and pieces of what was happening back home through Franklin and, occasionally, through Daphne, who still talked to a couple of people in Colton's circle. The picture wasn't pretty. Leonard and Lorraine separated. Not divorced. Separated. She moved in with her sister 2 towns over, taking the $31,000 with her. Leonard stayed in the house alone, which he could barely keep running because the bills he now had to pay himself consumed nearly everything he made. He stopped going to the bar on Fridays. Stopped buying lunch at work. Started bringing sandwiches wrapped in plastic bags like a man who was learning the price of things for the first time at 58 years old. Colton moved into a studio apartment near a bus line because he'd lost the truck. 14% interest on a $42,000 loan with zero income will do that. The repo company came on a Tuesday morning. He watched them tow it from his parking lot while eating cereal out of a mug because he didn't own bowls yet. Colton eventually got a job stocking shelves at a hardware store. $12 an hour. He told Franklin it was humbling. Franklin told me. I didn't feel satisfaction hearing it. I didn't feel much of anything. That's the thing nobody warns you about when you finally stop being someone's foundation. The collapse is loud and dramatic, and everyone wants to know how you feel about it. But the honest answer is that you feel tired. You feel like you've been holding your breath for 3 years, and you finally exhaled, and now you just want to sit in your apartment with your dog and not think about anyone else's electricity bill for a while. Sabrina asked me once if I regretted how I did it. The all-at-once approach. No warning. No transition. Just gone. I thought about it for a few days before I answered. Then I told her. They had 3 years of warning. Every dinner where my dad called my job fake was a warning. Every month they didn't look at a bill was a warning. Every time my mom skimmed $200 and didn't defend me was a warning. They had 1,000 warnings. They just didn't recognize them because they assumed the ATM would never unplug itself. She nodded. She didn't bring it up again. Reed sent me a final accounting. Total money paid to the household over 3 years. $50,400 in bills. $7,200 in grocery top-ups. $12,240 stolen by Leonard through the fake electricity account. $2,160 for the premium internet plan Colton upgraded without telling me. Grand total, $72,000. $72,000 I put into a house where my father told visitors I was unemployed. I printed that spreadsheet, framed it, hung it in my home office next to my engineering degree and the promotion letter from Conrad. Sabrina thought that was dark. I thought it was accurate. Then Colton called one last time. His voice was different. Careful. Like he was carrying a glass of water across a room and trying not to spill it. Dad had a heart scare. He's okay. He's stable. Everything's fine medically. But when they were admitting him at the hospital, the intake nurse asked about his family. And he told her he has 2 sons. Pause. He said one of them is an engineer. He used the word engineer, Travis. Not tech guy. Not computer stuff. Not air quotes. Engineer. And then he told the nurse he was very proud of him. Another pause. She wrote it down on his intake form. I saw it. Colton waited for me to say something. I didn't say anything for a long time. He added, quietly, I just thought you should know. I hung up, sat in my apartment while the afternoon light moved slowly across the floor. Radar jumped onto the couch, which he knows he's not supposed to do, and put his head on my leg. I put my hand on his back and just breathed. Sabrina came home an hour later, saw my face, and didn't ask a single question. She sat down next to me and rested her hand on my shoulder. We stayed there while the sun dropped behind the mountains and the apartment went dark in the good way. The quiet way. The way where nobody is panicking and the lights come back on whenever you decide to reach for the switch. I didn't call Leonard back. Not yet. But I didn't delete his number either. If you're still here, thanks for reading the whole thing. If any part of this sounds like your house, if you're the one quietly keeping the electricity on for people who can't be bothered to learn your job title, I want you to know something. You're not too sensitive. You're not ungrateful. You're not overreacting. The people who benefit from your silence will always call your boundaries a disruption. But the electricity doesn't lie. The water doesn't lie. The bills don't lie. And when they stop, everybody suddenly remembers who was paying them.